Hi guys and welcome. I am Enigmius and today we are continuing with our episode in the frames department. That's right, I told you in the last episode we were going to be setting up gantries full of lamps that we could raise and lower, and you can see I've actually got 2 of those done so that I can show you how they work, and then I will set up the one in the middle in real time so that we can kind of discuss as I go what's going on, why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, some of the considerations that come into play. Now, first of all, you can see these are the control panels. There's one here and there's one over there for that one. These are extremely rudimentary control setups, and the reason is mostly I wanted to get these tested before I sat down and started goofing around with the controls, because if the gantries themselves aren't working, trying to get the controls sorted is a waste of time. So before I start pushing buttons here, let me just kind of fly up and show you exactly how it works. We learned in the last episode that the frame motors operate on redstone pulses. So if you send them a solid signal, they'll pulse once, they'll move one block, and then they stop until you stop the signal and start it again. It's easier to just work in pulses. So what I've got set up here is these are receivers that receive a remote redstone signal. Now there's one here. The nice thing about them is you can right click on them to set frequency, similar to what we do with the item teleport pipes. And it actually shows the frequency on the block itself. So that's frequency 2, that's frequency 1. And then you can see we've got them connected so that when they receive a pulse, they send it down the redstone alloy. It gets picked up in the netherrack jacketed red alloy cable and then sent down to the motors. As well, the motors, you can see the sapphire jacketed blue alloy wire is coming down from this gray wire that runs actually all the way down the entire support structure that I built for the gantries. And in fact, it goes all the way down there. You can see I left it a little bit open with the covers, so you can see how the covers are concealing it. It goes all the way down and into the floor and connects to the very long line of blue electric battery boxes that I have downstairs. So that's where it's receiving the power. That's how it receives the redstone signal. So let's see what happens when it gets a redstone signal. Now, one is going to send frequency. One is going to should send a pulse to the up motor, and you can see there it goes. It's just like the wall in the monster harvesting room. It kind of tends to do it in chunks. It doesn't look really very smoothly animated or anything like that, but the bottom line is it works, and that's actually as high up as this one will go. And you can see I can lower it back down, and I can lower it all the way down to basically 2 blocks above the level of the floor. And at that point, it actually, you can see the frame goes off of the down motor altogether. And that's sort of a safety sort of feature, is by moving off the down motor, it literally can't get pushed down any further. So I won't have to worry about doing any kinds of repairs with the gantry stuck to the floor. The only motor it's in contact with is the up motor. So I can raise it up, and as soon as I do, it'll be back on the down motor, which sort of establishes this as the bottom level. And then the top level is actually established by that central frame hitting the glass ceiling. Now, the frame is capped with a cover. As you can see, it's got covers all around it, but very importantly, it has this cover here, because if it didn't, when it contacted the glass ceiling, when I went to move it down again, it would actually pull the glass block out and cause quite a mess. I learned that the hard way. So now anytime I've got a frame that runs the risk of contacting anything that I don't want pulled apart, I put a cover on it. The easiest way to think of frames is that they are sticky unless covered. That's the easiest way that I can put it, and you'll see how that comes into play as we build it. And this setup here is pretty much identical. So that's what I've been up to, was messing around, getting them to work. Frames, they're not complicated. I want to make that clear. If people are looking at them, they're a little bit intimidated. To be honest with you, I'm not intimidated by much in video games, but even I was a little bit leery of approaching working with frames, just because I'd looked at some YouTube videos discussing frames, and they just did, unfortunately, not a great job of explaining it, which is fine if it's like a let's play video and someone is showing you what they're doing with frames. But when they label it a tutorial and they do a really awful job of explaining it, that's when I kind of think like either it's really, really complicated and it's going over my head, or this guy is just like not really doing a very good job. And the first thing I'm going to think, trying to be a reasonable person, is maybe it's just going over my head. So that's what ended up happening. And then I realized that the bigger you make it, the more chances you're going to run into problems that are difficult to track down. But if you keep it simple, it's actually not complicated at all. So I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I possibly can, even though these do get quite large. So you can see I've got the blue electric cables hanging down so that they're basically showing me where to put my motors. But the first thing that I want to put into place is actually the column of support frames that will be riding on the motors that pull and push the gantry up and down. So to do that, I'm actually going to make a nerd pole here, because I like that term, nerd pole, which is, I like building up with a jetpack because you can just kind of pulse it a little bit and you get a bunch of blocks in. It's like the rapid fire sort of thing. So what I need is, I want to start it as low as it's going to go, which means right actually where I'm standing now. I've made a bunch of frames because these projects, if you think you've got enough frames to get done what you want to do, you're probably wrong. It's what I've learned up to this point so far. So I'm going to put these two here. Now the motors are going to be on this side of the wires. They aren't going to be underneath the wires. So that's why I'm over on this side doing that. And this is actually going to be, yeah, the motor. I'll just put a cobblestone block here to mark it. This motor here is going to be a motor right here. So this being just below it is going to be the same as that one over there now, is just below it, or should be just below it. So that I'll be starting when I build it at the lowest possible level. And I want to get, the reason why I want to do this now is I want to get the covers on the frames before I start building things around the frames, where getting covers on them after the fact will become difficult. So that's what I'm going to do. I can't believe how many slime balls I get while I'm down here. So because I never ever ever want this column to stick to the ceiling, that's the first cover we put on. And then because the motors are likely to be the next thing that these come in contact with, we're gonna cover that off. We'll go back up. We'll just kind of knock a couple of these out of here, and we'll just go back up and get the other side. And okay, so these are covered as far as the motors go, and I had 7 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. So now again, I'll cover these. I don't need to cover them all the way down, but I just want to make an effort to be thorough from the beginning so that I don't overlook something later on and find myself in trouble. Now this column will also be, as you can see, when it goes all the way up to the ceiling, it'll be rubbing past the covers over the blue electric cable. So I want to cover those off as well, so that they, like I say, slide past instead of tearing past, which they tend to do if they're not covered. So again, I don't need to go all the way down with these, but it's not going to hurt anything if I do. And then once I have these covered, that's when I want to get the motors in place, and I want to get my receivers and my transmitters in place, and I want to test the function of the motors to make sure that they're oriented properly and everything is working properly before I start adding a bunch of pieces to the gantry. Because what I've found is if you make a mistake when you're assembling the gantry, you don't have adjacent blocks and everything properly set up so that everything is stuck to the support frames, it can stop the motors from functioning. Like you'll push a button and nothing happens. So while it's simple, we can test the motors, and then once we know the motors are working, then we can start expanding on it. So how's the best way to do this? I think we'll go up this way again. I just broke this nerd pole down and now we're building it back up again, but that's fine. Alright, so that was a little too high, but that's okay. What we need to do is that sticky keys. So now this is, where's my motor? Don't tell me I didn't bring enough motors. There we go. Lots of motors. Alright, so we've got this guy. Now the thing with the motors, like a lot of blocks, is the control face or the movement face will face you, whatever direction you put it. So you can see the arrow is facing, you know, on the side directly adjacent to me. If I had done it from up above, it would have been facing up or whatever. So in this case, I don't have to do anything to it. It's the control face is facing where I want it. It's facing towards the column, and it's also set to move down. And that's exactly what I want this motor to be doing. So we can break that guy. And then we want to... ooh, just about missed. Well, I did miss, but I caught myself. We want to put another motor. Probably easier to build around. We want to put another one on the end of this cable, just like we did the previous one, but I want to have a block behind it so that I can line everything up properly, like so. And then I want to, yeah, see, I want to be able to stand that way so that it's not confused about which way is facing which. So put that guy there. Now, this has always been tended to point down, so I'm going to take my chances with my screwdriver. I'm going to hit it once, twice, and that should be facing up. Actually, yeah, there's doesn't appear to be any other visual indicator beside the arrow, which we can't see because it's facing a covered piece. That's fine, so we'll just break this down. Wow, I should put a battery pack on. Just for a moment before my tools run out of charge. Okay, so I'm satisfied that that's adequately covered. So I've got a full charge back on my drill. We'll fly up, we'll set up the receivers. If I could fly. And receivers are in the bag. Wireless transmitter, wireless receiver. We need some of those. And we need the red. Alright, so make sure that we're lining it up properly. Receiver. Receiver. The irony is that I'm building gantries for lights, and without torches along the top of the support structure, I get monster spawns. That's just brilliant. Alright, so alloy, and netherrack jacketed red alloy cable. And we'll connect that guy and that guy. And we'll just drop down here. And connect that guy. So that should be, we just have to set the frequency, which I intentionally left. So 3 will be up. 4 will be down. So that's 1 and 2 over there, 3 and 4 here, 5 and 6 over there. And now we will, let's just, yeah, I don't really want to, that guy's already out too far as it is. We'll set it up over here. Again, these are just, I'm just setting up temporary control panels for testing purposes. When it's all done, I should ideally have one central control panel that handles all 3 gantries, and it'll be a little bit more sophisticated than just you know, a button and a you know, a transmitter for each one. so we don't need that anymore, actually. All right, so transmitters, one here, the bouton, and just, okay, that guy gets pulsed, that guy gets pulsed. So those are properly wired. Now we just have to set the frequency, and now, so up shouldn't work at all. Let's just try down. All right, up, yeah, you can see it move now. It's basically, I'm judging it by the position relative to the down motor. It's on the down motor and it wasn't before. Ideally, I would be able to push the button and see it at the same time. So down works and up works. So that's really all we wanted to test for now, was that up and down work. The column is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Now we'll just double check the dimensions. Should be, yeah, that one's 7 and this one's 7. So now all we really need to do is build out the structure so that we can put lamps on it. And this is, again, one of those things that it's only as complicated as you allow it to be, but you still have to understand how the frames work. And we'll get into more of that as I get farther along in setting them up. So in a perfect world, that would be all we needed to do. We wouldn't have to run cables anywhere. We wouldn't have to think about powering it. We wouldn't have to think about how the gantry is going to move it all. But it's not a perfect world. So we need to run some cables, and then we need to think about whether or not everything is properly connected.